Montrose is like many small towns across America. It's a small, sleepy old town where not much happens. Located on a major state highway, thousands of cars and trucks pass through the city every day on their way to somewhere else. It's just big enough for 2 stoplights and 2 gas stations. We have a lazy river running through our town, a grocery store, a post office, a McDonald's, an annual blueberry festival, and we have a high school. Although small, the community takes great pride in the high school and its graduates. Many alumni return to their hometown to live and work and raise their children in the community where they grew up. This is a town that takes pride in their country, delights in their accomplishments, and celebrates the victories of the former students who go out into the world to do great things. It is no surprise then that many graduates of Montrose go on to join the military. You can probably find a similar story in thousands of other small towns and cities across the country. Young men and women from Montrose have joined the military and traveled to places that are far different from their hometown. They have served with distinction and valor. They have done their job with pride and dedication, and they have come home broken, struggling to adjust, failing to fit in, lost in the world that they used to move comfortably in before their service. Many take their own lives. Our town has been hit hard by veteran suicide, and we are not alone. We wondered why. After we caught our breath, we set out in a search of understanding to try to find out why our former classmates, friends, and family members came home from their service and committed suicide. We wanted to ask other veterans why this was happening. We wanted to talk to the parents and family members of veterans. We thought professionals who make it their mission to help veterans adjust to life back home could give us some insight. We wanted to find out exactly what PTSD is and how it is affecting our veterans.
My name is Kenny Bertram.
I'm Tim Hobson. I'm Jason Perrin.
I'm Charlene Gray.
My name is Dr. Mark Highsmith.
My name is Deborah Strong.
My name is Haley Strong.
My name is Andrea Jones.
My name is Daniel Vella.
You know, when a family member that is young has committed suicide in particular, it is an incredibly traumatic experience for the family. There's some, as opposed to a celebration, it usually turns to just a really overwhelming grief and a time of great sadness and confusion, and it's very difficult. I think it's the most difficult thing, you know, anybody can go through, is to have a loved one in their life.
United States Marine Corps, 2005 to 2009, stationed 29 Palms, 1 toward Iraq, 1 toward to Afghanistan. Probably, I guess I didn't necessarily notice it in myself as quickly as maybe other people that tell you, like, you've changed, or they notice things in your personality that maybe and you chop it up to maybe, well, I'm grown as a person, of course I've changed, you know, but some of those changes may have been caused by issues without realizing it, and then you begin to realize when your family and friends might point out things and that you maybe have changed in some ways.
I was in the Army from 2009 to 2016. I was stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky for 4 years, and then I did 3.5 years in Fort Carson, Colorado. When I came home, I was struggling with who I was and where I fit in, because when you're overseas, you're told what to do, where to be, how to act, and then when you come home, you're kind of set on your own, and I was realizing that I wasn't the same person I was when I left, and I was trying to figure out whether that was the military that changed me, it was me growing. And I started getting angry a lot, and social situations started making me very nervous, and I just kind of caught on that maybe something wasn't right and I needed help.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a representative of a family of disorders called anxiety disorders. That is to say, they're disorders, the predominant feature of which is anxiety or fear. A panic disorder is another example of an anxiety disorder. A phobia is another example of an anxiety disorder. But PTSD is another representative of that class of disorders. It's distinct because it's caused or precipitated in those who are susceptible. In other words, some people would have much more difficulty developing PTSD than others just because of how they're made. their constitution. You know, people who are more intense or less intense than others. You know, people, if some little stressful thing happens, they can't sleep for 3 days, versus people who, if they saw a tragic car accident, would be troubled by it, but would go home and sleep well that evening nonetheless. So some people are more constitutionally vulnerable to developing that. It's caused by overwhelming or unendurable trauma, something that's above the pale of normal stressful experiences, generally involving either the loss of limbs or life, severe physical damage, or death, or hearing about it can also be a additional stressor, but typically people see it. We see among military veterans, very typically, is it isn't just that one horrible thing that happens, it's day after day after day after day.
The first time you met the Boone brothers, they were twins, you didn't forget them. And so I actually remember meeting them when I was a substitute teacher for Mr. Longini's 6th grade class. They left an impression on me then, and I coached them in middle school wrestling. And then as a freshman history teacher, I had both of them in class. And then I was also the high school wrestling coach. So I had 4 years of them on the mat, in the classroom, and like I said, they're just great kids, leaders, definitely community, school-oriented kids. I not only coached the Boone brothers, I taught the Boone brothers, and they were almost like family. Two great young men in the classroom, in the community, leaders. So those two were especially difficult, and like I said, especially being a couple of months apart from each other, it was surreal.
I have 2 children in the military right now. My daughter has served for 8.5 years. She was active for 8 years, and she's in the reserves now, currently. She's done 2 tours to Afghanistan. Seeing your child going over there, having shady service, if any internet or telephone service at all, not knowing, not being able to listen to the news, not being able to watch the news, starting to cry if anyone brought things up, and about the news and what was going on in the area that she was. It was hard not hearing from her, but it would have been almost harder to hear what she was going through. And of course, now that she's home, I hear little bits and pieces that slip out more and more about how they forgot to flip the switch, and or they had the switch flipped, but they went over a landmine. And that could have been the end of my daughter. Sometimes people, she tells stories of people forgetting to flip that switch and going over a landmine and blowing themselves up. So it was very difficult as a mom.
AJ was in Turkey for 1.5 years. He was only supposed to originally be there, I believe, for 6 months was his original orders. And then they got extended because the job that he did, he was only the second group of people to be doing that. He worked with the THAAD missile system. They were only the second group trained to do anything with the THAAD missile system. So after being there for 1 year, all but him and another gentleman from his unit were able to return back to the United States. AJ and the other gentleman volunteered to stay to train the next group because they were the only ones who did not have kids and family to go back to. So they stayed for an additional 6 months to train the next group taking over. I wish I knew what happened to AJ. I believe he suffered from PTSD. Maybe some other mental disorders on top of that, and was untreated. I thought he was having a lot of problems with anxiety. I suffer from anxiety, and at first when he got home, that's what I thought it was, that he just had to readjust to being a civilian. He struggled with not knowing what to do. Like he thrived in the military. It was structured. He did very well with that. You know, they break you down and they teach you to do things this way. They tell you when to eat, they tell you when to sleep. And he came home and was lost. He didn't know what to do.
When people leave the military, they see the world differently. For some, I think it's like maybe going to a different country where everyone speaking a different language, because the language they had in the military, the structure of their day, it's all very different. And when they get home, and I'm not just talking about PTSD here, I'm talking about the average person who's discharged from the military. They come back to a different world if they've been gone for a significant period of time. Their lives have been structured, they've been very routine. Very often when they come back, it's like, you know, what do I do next today? They don't really know very often. So there's all these choices. And most of them are very good at problem solving because they learn how to do problem solving in all sorts of different ways. But they see, or they can see their friends very differently, or their families very differently. Very often they see their families as immature, whereas they weren't before. And very often the families see them as you know, being irritable and anxious and isolating and not willing to participate in what other people are doing.
Well, you know, the other thing that we hear repeatedly from our veterans also is that, you know, my family just doesn't understand me anymore. You know, that's a big thing that we hear. So, you know, if there's that feeling also, it almost pushes the family away more.
Perhaps there are issues that some people won't understand as a veteran. There's been things we've been through that people, you can't understand it. Doesn't mean they can't try to sympathize with it. Doesn't mean they don't understand trauma. You know, but everybody goes through their own trauma. And I hate that a stigma for a veteran to tell maybe a civilian that's trying to help you, genuinely help you, oh, you wouldn't be able to help me, you just don't understand. We can't turn away that help though, even just because they don't understand. You don't have to understand to sit and listen to somebody, you know, and sometimes that's all they need maybe, you know, 10 minutes of somebody to listen to what I got to say, you know. And so I hate that cliche, like, oh, you just wouldn't get it, because I think sometimes they might get it if we're willing to get away from that stigma of you couldn't possibly help me. They might possibly be able to, in my opinion.
We've learned now in society that going to war, there's cause and effect to the individual who goes. And we recognize that today. We try to help in that area. If you go back in past wars, they would say of someone coming out that we now call trauma, PTSD, that they didn't look at that. They just said you were shell-shocked or you're a coward because you had these various symptoms you were exhibiting. And today we know that to not only to treat, but to look for and to encourage the veteran, the soldier, to seek help, to speak to others, to let everyone know what's going on inside. And that's for everyone that comes out, not just someone who saw something traumatic and had an effect on their system that way. But all military who are coming out should be counseled, should be debriefed, and then should be helped into blending back into society.
The PTS perspective hasn't really changed it. I like to think that every other veteran is like-minded as myself, and although I know most of them do suffer from some sort of PTSD, it's kind of an unspoken rule that we don't talk about it with each other. So we just kind of, you know, joke around in our military manner and use our jargon. And
there's a stigma that's associated with any mental illness or any psychological abnormality. I think that's grown less because of the largely because of the changes in our political system and hence our healthcare delivery system, resulting from the large group of veterans of service in Vietnam who came home with that disorder. And I think that our country didn't want to have another post-Vietnam issue with so many returning veterans. So we've destigmatized PTSD, I think, to a great degree.
Yeah, there is a lot of these. We throw the word around, stigma around, but you see the movies, the shows, and things. The veteran that comes home with problems. It's a stereotype almost in its own right. And to be the veteran with problems sometimes is a thing to look in like, well, he's got problems. He must have seen some tough stuff, right? He must be messed up from the war. And it makes you feel like, yeah, I must be because I've been through. So trauma equals ego in a way, if that makes sense. And so we want to have that trauma almost. We want to have that story, but we need to be outspoken about that and be like, hey, it's not cool if like we need to work at these issues and not be proudful of the trauma, like work through it and not use it as our story. Oh, well, I'm just a messed up vet. No, you're more than that.
So what are the answers? What can we do to stop the increasing number of veteran suicides?
Seek that help, man. Like, even if you personally don't think I need it, like I'm good, like I'm just going through some things. Reach out for it. Talk about it. Put things out on the table. You feel a certain way about something, let it be heard.
Get help. Speak out. You're not alone. It does not make you weak. If you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, the strongest, toughest person in the world can't change that without cognitive behavioral therapy and medication sometimes. It doesn't mean that they have to do that forever, just to help them get through this hard spot.
Get help. Even if you have an inkling that you might have PTSD, just reach out and get help. And it's not anything to be ashamed of. Just do what you have to do to make yourself right and your family right.
I would definitely say to reach out to other vets and to use them as support.
Seek help.
Seek help in one way or another. And I don't think the first call needs to come to the VA, but I think you need to get out and start to talk with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a close family friend or a pastor or somebody, and start to talk about what's happening with you. And family members need to be able to just listen, pretty much just listen. When you start to do problem solving too much or giving advice, well, veterans know that they've tried things and they haven't worked, so I can turn it off and shut it down. You need to just listen and say, I will help you. I will help you connect with any resources that, as we work through this together, may help.
Get your ass into a clinic. Reach out and get some treatment. It's available out there, and it is a disorder that you can significantly, to an extreme degree, recover from.
If people are isolating, well, don't let them do it. Show up, just show up and say, I'm here.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to do, just show up their door and say, I'm here, and maybe I brought you a pizza or something, but I'm here. I'm not going to make you do anything. I'm just going to listen if you want me to listen, otherwise I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that 22 veterans commit suicide a day, and 14 of those veterans are not receiving any form of treatment. Let a veteran know that you are listening, that you care, and you can be part of the solution.